My name is Dunya Medhat, and I'm a junior consultant at Turner and Townsend. We are joined today by Gareth Field, senior consultant, also from Turner and Townsend. This is a retrofit information support and expertise, or RISE event, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, delivered by Turner and Townsend. Thank you all for joining us again. I will now hand over to Gareth to start today's presentation.
Grand, thank you very much. Welcome. But I guess the starting point with all of this is when we think about resident engagement, we're thinking about customer experience. We're thinking about these are our customers, potential customers or actual customers, and how do we work with them? How do we engage with them? Actually, a lot of what I bring into this isn't from social housing or etc. It's actually from my time working in the National Trust when I was working on visitor experience and outdoor visitor experience, about how do we attract people into this? How are we engaging with this? And prior to that, I worked in development and sports development, and the same thing again. Actually, you're kind of going, we've got a load of people here that aren't interested. How do we attract them into this activity, this sport, this experience, this retrofit program? It's that hard to reach. How are we going to reach those people and get them involved and active? So we're going to look at engagement strategies and plans. I hate the term advanced. I really do. I don't think anything is ever advanced. It's only advanced if you've not heard it before. So we're going to look at sort of some ideas around that. Think about the sort of channels for communication, and that's one of the key things I think within all this. I don't ever talk about an engagement plan on its own. I talk about a communication and engagement plan. Those two things have to go hand in hand, and they have to start at day one. They can't start at day 100 of the project. When once the project manager's got, all right, we're going to do these homes first, these homes first, these homes, etc., etc. Got it all planned out, and then they go to the comms manager. Right, communicate that. And the comms manager goes, well, I could do, but I can't because X, Y, and Z. And they'll always have reasons. For whatever you're doing, they'll always have reasons. So if you bring them in on day one and you involve them in the project planning, you might still end up with the same project plan, but they've been involved and had that opportunity to help steer it and affect it and use their knowledge from that marketing to influence a project. How are we going to monitor this? We can do all this, but actually, how do we know we're being successful? How do we know we're going to do anything at doing the right things? We've got a couple of case studies and a bit of a quick checklist at the end. So lots to get through, so I'll just crack on. You might have seen this before. This is a retrofit customer journey, and you can probably recognize this whether we're talking about local grant, whether we're talking about social housing fund, or whether we're talking about Joe Bloggs who has decided that they want to retrofit their home. It's all the same process. You go through those same steps. So right from the beginning of the process about engagement, the need for engagement, recognizing that's really, really important. I don't know if you guys might have children, etc., like I have. When the school send home a letter, and they send home this letter, and they're going to say, right, on next week there's a school trip happening, and we're going to take the kids raft building. And you go, oh, that's brilliant! I've seen rafting on the telly. Yeah, I know what rafting is. It's where they're big inflatables and they're going down a river, and there's loads of waterfalls and kind of whitewater rapids and all that sort of stuff. Oh, that'd be really, really exciting for them. But I'm really scared they're going to get hurt. So I'm going to say no. And I'm not going to let my child do this. But what they actually mean is they're going to go to a pond at the side of Cumbria, and they're going to get some barrels and planks and those bits of string. And they're going to tie it together into a raft, and they're going to float out to a buoy in the water to see if they can make it. So flip this to retrofit. We can go, all right, brilliant. We've got this great program of retrofit. We're going to fit all these air source heat pumps, or and it's going to be amazing. And the resident goes, I've heard rumours about air source heat pumps not working properly when it's cold. I don't want my house retrofitted. I don't know what retrofit is. Why would I want solar panels? Underfloor insulation? What are you on about? Why would I put insulation under my floor? Etc., etc., etc. So they're unable to give you an informed answer because they don't have the information. So just like me as a parent, I don't have the right information. I can't make the right decision. Do our residents have the right information? And that's all the way through this process. Do they have the right information to make informed decisions about their lives? And that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? We're not just, yes, we're retrofitting buildings, but actually we're retrofitting people's lives. We're changing their lives. We're changing what they have in their homes, how they interact, how much money they might have, what kind of heating they have, how comfortable they are, etc., etc. They need the right information to make those right decisions at the get-go. So as you're going into that, you're thinking about, okay, we've got to think really carefully about how we're going to engage with these residents, how we're going to work with them. So if you're thinking about getting the information out on a local grant, it's like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to get that information out to the wide audience that you potentially have? Those who might be interested, those who might not be interested, and those in between. So, we've got to really start thinking about that engagement planning from early days. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people you can work with around this? Who are the organizations that can help be that trusted voice to help spread your message? And I use trusted voice kind of really importantly, because what we actually are needing is to people to speak for us. They might hear us, if we're a social housing provider or a local authority, how much trust do they have in us? Probably not a huge amount. So actually, who do we need to speak wisely for us? Citizens and advice. Could be a local faith group. It could be organizations that work in the community. It could be organizations that actually have an entrance in for us into energy advice. So it might be things like local energy advice charities, local sustainability charities. So I worked for Cumbria Action for Sustainability for a while, delivering their energy advice service. And we were in and out people's doors every day, talking to residents who would have been eligible for Warm Homes local grant. It would have been very easy for us to have communicated about the local grant. Right, brilliant. This is where you're at. Your house is in this kind of condition and this kind of energy performances. So actually there is support for you for making your home warmer, etc., etc. We would have been that trusted voice for your local grant scheme. Yeah, you've got to go through launch. You've got to tell people that you're doing this. There's that drip feeding, and then brilliant, this is happening. We're going forward to this. And then we're getting into that retrofit program where the retrofit coordinator is involved and the design team and your contractors, etc., etc. And those people who've made that commitment and kind of bought into it are going through that process. They might still just turn around and go, actually, no, we don't want that. But they're more involved and you get them more actively involved. Keep that back in your mind about that informed consent. Keep them informed. Tell them what's happening, when it's happening, what it might impact, how long will it impact for. So, one of the grant recipients I'm working with, they were doing some underfloor insulation, and then suddenly they found that, the resident was being told by the contractors they weren't allowed to be in the house during the day when the underfloor insulation was going on. And then suddenly it's like, poof, stopped all the programming because all the residents were going, what do you mean? Well, I'm going to be in my house because I'm a retired person. What else am I going to do? All that stuff about kind of making sure people are informed all the way through the process. So, as with all things, you need a plan. You need to kind of come up with some kind of major engagement. And I talk about an engagement and marketing plan. So, what's the purpose? What will it involve? Who's involved? How will we know if it's working? So there's a very simple template that I've used in the past. So, what is the message you want to communicate? Now we need to think about there's that website, isn't it? The kind of Ministry for Plain English or something, where actually how can we get as plain and communication as we can? Get rid of all our gobbledygook and our kind of nonsense that we get wrapped up in around retrofit, around it's an air source heat pump. It's not an ASHP. It's those kind of things. We're not talking about CWI and EWI. What is cavity wall insulation? What is external wall insulation? To your average resident, to your average person on the street, external wall insulation means nothing. So how can we get this language really, really clear and really plain? So we're talking about energy efficiency assessments to start at Acacia Avenue. So energy efficiency assessments, well, actually what we're talking about is retrofit assessments, aren't we? But there's no point in, I guess, to start to use that word of retrofit. It doesn't mean anything. Who's involved? Asset managers involved at one level. Community engagement partners involved at another level. The resident liaison partners involved at another level. So different people involved doing different things at different times. So you can see through there, I don't need to read it through it all, but how they're going to be involved, when they're going to do it, what's the message, what resources are they going to need, who can help them, and how we're going to find out if we're successful. So it could be through access rates, it could be through number of refusals, it could be through follow-up phone calls, it could be through kind of converting initial contact into a home assessment or something. So as you're thinking about local grant, it's like that initial, yeah, we might be interested, that conversion through to, right, actually we've got it through the door and we're doing a sort of a proper appraisal process with them. So really simple at the get-go, come up with this communications and engagement plan, break it all down, get it as like deep as you can. This should be sides and sides and sides of A4 bits of paper. You know, this is not oh, we're doing 3 things. When I turned up at the social housing provider that I worked for, when we started an SHDF, it was like, right, how are we communicating to the residents? And they said, oh, we're going to send a letter. Right, brilliant. What else are we going to do? Well, that's it. We're just going to send a letter. Right, no, we're not. We're changing this. We're going to do something different. So thinking about that all the way through, what can we do different? Who can we work with to get that message across? Especially as we're starting to think about local grant, is actually what data do we have above and beyond what we might hold? So social housing providers, you might think, have an easy life. They know where their homes are, they know what EPCs they are, etc., etc., etc. Maybe they don't know all of that. I started when I started as a social housing provider, we only had about 40% EPCs on the properties. So we didn't have that data, we didn't have that knowledge. But as you're going out and thinking about like private rented or low income, low energy efficiency homes, think about what can we do? We can find out information about the EPC and SAP. Are they on or off the gas grid? You know, what's the tenure? What in the past, what have they claimed for benefits, etc., etc., that kind of stuff. So starting to go through those open databases, what can you find out? What information can you get? Talking to your internal teams. So if you're local grant, talking to not only your housing officers, but also can you go and talk to your income teams? Who are the people who are struggling with their finances? Who are people who've reached out and asked for help? Because they're probably living in low income, low energy efficiency homes that are eligible for your funding. So kind of keep thinking about that. Who else can we talk to? Who are the partners? Citizens Advice Bureau, they might not be able to share their data with you, but they'll be able to help share your data and your information. Thinking about local knowledge. If you send a surveyor out in the car, get them to drive around a couple of communities, and they will pretty quickly come up with a list of properties or a list of areas where they think that they're going to be able to target your work. And also talk to contractors. So contractors have been in and out of these homes doing work. They've also got a pretty good idea where the homes that are needing work done to them are. So you're finding these properties through a variety of sources. It's not just you kind of go, what can we do? Where should we go? Go out there, seek them out, find people who can work with you. So, let's use me as an example here. I'm in Cumbria. I was delivering a local grant. I'd start off with the partnerships. I start off with my stakeholders. So, as I mentioned, the local energy advice service. I know there's very few contractors up here, so actually I talk to those contractors. I'd be working with the other third sector groups, Citizens of Advice, other groups that work in the community. I'd be thinking about how I could get into some of the NHS type organisations, just to share my message out there, to kind of put information out there as a trusted voice, etc. So be thinking really wide and diverse to start with. Also, your MPs are really good. MP and local councillors are really, really good at telling you who's struggling in their communities, because they get told and they know. So lots and lots of do. But the big challenge for that is, as you've just heard me create a list, that takes time, it takes effort, and capacity is a challenge with all of this. So one of the things within advanced resident engagement is you need time. There is no quick win. There is no kind of, oh, if you do this, you'll get there. It takes time, takes effort, takes staff time. So this is what I've been talking about with your local enablers. Who are the stakeholders? Who are your organisations that can help you? They can help you get the message out. They can also kind of help inform your program. So, if you are working in a community with a high density of a certain religious group, actually working out when is the best time to do it, to do the retrofit programs, and when's the time to actually just walk away and leave it for a couple of months. We we need to become more sympathetic, more considerate, more understanding about the communities and the residents in those homes. When are they available? When are they not available for work to be done in their homes? I was also thinking about that from a contact point of view. Yes, we might all have mobile phones. During COVID, I was unfortunately, my mother passed away, and I was trying to communicate with my brother, and he was not allowed his phone on the factory floor. So, he had to take a day off to answer phone calls almost because he couldn't take his phone into his workplace, and he could not be contacted between 9 and 5 in the day. So actually, as you think through to our residents, can they be contacted during 9 to 5? When is the best time to contact them? How is the best way to contact them, etc., etc. So, as I mentioned, it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, it's going to take people. Who else can do this work for you? So, trusted voice stakeholders, yes, brilliant. We can train them up, they're going to do that. Thinking about our staff teams across our organisation. So, if you're a local authority, who is it that communicates with residents on a regular basis? Who is talking to them all the time? So, you will know that in your organisations. Go and get those truck guys trained up. Make sure that if a resident says to them, "I've heard about this local grant scheme. Can I be eligible?" Or, "I've heard about a local grant scheme. It sounds dodgy to me." No, it's not dodgy. It's fine. The local authority are running it, etc., etc. They can then allay those fears because, if anybody goes on Facebook or whatever and got any interest in energy advice, you will find yourself barraged with Eco4 and etc., etc. funding. We can fund this. We can fund this. We can fund this. There's a lot of concern out there about scams, etc., etc. So, back to that, drumming, bashing the drum about the trusted voice. Make sure that if anybody in your organization is asked, they can at least give a basic answer to say, yes, it's right. Yes, they can help you. Here's how to do it. They might not know the ins and outs of it, but they can actually be that point of contact and help refer people onto your scheme. So lots and lots of staff training going on. Might be that you create boilerplate communication sheets, which is like a one-sider that they can have on the desk, and if somebody rings up and they ask, they go, "Oh yeah," get the flyers out with the tradies and the staff working on the ground, making sure they've got something they can hand out if they get asked. So what is advanced? As I say, I hate that term. I just, for me, it's about us treating our residents like humans, and whether that's a social housing provider or a local authority, it's actually dealing with the humans in the way that the humans want to be dealt with. So, going above and beyond what they might expect, exceeding expectations. So, doing the bare minimum is not going to work. I'm just going to send a letter out. No, that's the bare minimum. That's not going to be effective or useful. What more can you do? What more can you actually say? What are the different tools you can use? So thinking about if your resident is that customer and you want to exceed their expectations, what can you do? So it's not just about sending them a letter. It's not just about banging on the door. It's about the whole experience that they have, that it should be easy. It should be intuitive for them, etc., etc. They shouldn't need to go onto some kind of portal and fill out some details on a portal and etc. How can we reduce all the barriers to them saying yes? I say informed information, one of the barriers. Any kind of problem with digital literacy or just been having to fill in a form online, etc., is another barrier. What are all these barriers we can remove to make it successful? And then as we're thinking about this, it's kind of going, well, actually, one of the most trusted voices, probably their neighbour. It's probably the person who's down the street. It's probably the person in a residence group. So how can we help the residents' voice in this program? So I've already mentioned actually listening and going, actually, there's no point in doing it this time of the year because there's a big religious festival. We'll move it back. But taking that above that, well, actually, how can they actively be involved in talking about retrofit to the residents that they live with? So lots and lots of stuff there that you really need just to understand your residents, really understand your communities. Previous delivery, Retrofit's been around long enough now to probably have had some experience. So how can we learn from them? How can we learn from that previous stuff that we did and we got wrong? We've all made mistakes. We've all had problems. Um, my biggest mistake um, from a resident engagement perspective was our resident liaison partner went off ill and we didn't do anything about it to start with because she thought, she'll come back. She'll come back. And then her illness stayed. And unfortunately, she stayed away for about 2 or 3 months. And we lost so much connection with our residents because we didn't jump on that quick enough. We didn't replace that role with anybody. We just carried on. Oh, she'll be back. She'll be back. Oh, she's not back. And by that time, hundreds of missed phone calls, hundreds of missed emails, hundreds of missed meetings. We just were then on our back foot fighting again to get that resident engagement. So, learn from that previous delivery, learn from what you've happened before in your organization, and do something different. What's that phrase? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So let's try and get something different. Channels of communication, I've touched on this a little bit, is like, when are they available? When are they accessible for a conversation? How do they want that conversation? Do they want it online? Do they want it face to face? Do they want it over the phone? Do they want a letter? Understanding your audience. If you are talking about, people, my mother-in-law, etc., they're in their 70s. I'm not going to be sending her an email. I'm not going to be sending something on TikTok or something like that. I can be going around and seeing them. Versus, if we're talking about early school leavers, people in their late teens who've, if we're talking about that kind of community, first homes, etc., we're going to be, well, who are the influencers? Who are the community influencers? Who might be following on Insta or etc.? How can we get through to that audience in a different way? So making sure we're doing all the different type of things. Face to face is really important. People like that. People trust people. So making sure we're getting out there and talking to people face to face, making sure we've kind of got those connections. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the retrofit program, but we need to be talking about what's important to them. So, I was at Housing 25 last week, lots and lots of conversations, very few conversations about carbon saving, lots and lots of conversations about money saving or energy saving or reduction in energy consumption, etc., etc. So thinking about the right topic, the right conversation to have about what's important to them. Though you will find some residents that are really, really important in reducing their carbon, and that's fantastic. And I'm fully supportive of that, as my reason for doing this work. But for a lot of people, it's not. So actually, what's the important conversation? What's the important topic? So hopefully you start to get this kind of theme around this. All of this, we need to very, very clearly make sure we have an equality, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. So you might need to do an accessibility assessment for your communications and engagement plan. Kind of go through it and go, right, are we doing the right thing to make sure we get through to the residents? I've worked, as I mentioned, in a housing association, not a housing association, a local energy advice service. We worked with the Deaf Association to create some short videos around energy advice using one of their translators. And it was like, boom, we suddenly had doors open to a whole audience that we had been ignoring before. And thinking about for yourself with the retrofit programs, who are the audiences you might be ignoring because of your communication approaches or the channels that you're going down? It might be that you kind of go down the line of hearing impairments or visual impairments or etc. How do you do that? And making sure that you're offering this service out to everybody who lives in your community. So thinking about monitoring and managing your engagement now, it is really important. And I think, there's lots of organizations out there doing warm homes who are outsourcing all this resident engagement, outsourcing it to other organizations, to the contractor, etc. And you will have SLAs around this. You'll have we'll make 3 phone calls to attempt to contact a resident, and after that we'll stop, or we'll hand them back to you, etc. So some of these resident related metrics are a way managing your contractor or whoever's doing your resident engagement for you. It's also kind of used to understand, actually, we keep phoning this person during the afternoon and we never get a response. Oh, maybe we need to change the time that we phone them. So some of these are for us to learn and to develop our practice and what we're doing. So, as a contract manager, when I was contract managing retrofit programs, it was like, oh, look, I can see what time you've been contacting these residents, and they're all in the afternoon, and you don't seem to get through to them. Right? Can you change what time you're contacting them? You do something different. So all these metrics are really useful for us to learn and manage our contractors and manage the people we're working with. You might be working with self-referrals for local grants. It might be looking for referrals from other organisations. So you need metrics for how you're going to capture all that kind of information. Because by doing this, you start to capture whether it's working or not working and learning. And then as we're moving into all of this, once you start getting into that program, all the past 2035 will have monitoring and engagement aspects to this. So you need to make sure that it's being done properly. So you could put all the effort in, and you probably, anybody who's worked with contractors and stuff in the past, we'd put a huge amount of effort into this village of getting through the doors, getting them bought into, having the works done. And the first contractors on site came in, caused loads of upset by being loud radio, shouting, etc., 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 on the roof of a home. And every other resident phoned up and basically went, yeah, they're not coming. We don't want them in our village anymore. And you can see all this. So it's really important that you're sort of managing this through that process, that managing, you've got them through the door, you've got the retrofit design done, you've got the retrofit agreed, you're working through all these steps. So resident engagement doesn't stop, continues all the way through. And that's where it's really important. We're making sure that the monitoring and engagement practices continue. So some of that around is the technical side of stuff of what you're doing. Some of that is about making sure the residents understand what's happening and then how to use the new equipment. So how are we going to do that? A database is really useful. Database of who the properties are, what you're doing with them. So if you're a social housing provider, you might already have a property database. But if you've got a way of putting into your database or your retrofit engagement or your retrofit works, making sure you're tracking that all the way through your database. If you're not, and you're a local authority, what are you going to do? How are you going to track these programs? How are you going to track all the way through from that resident, from your engagement right through to completion and making sure that it all gets done? So database is really good. Lots and lots of benefits to it. Makes it kind of smoother to track the resident's journey through the program. So I'll just give you a moment to read this. So here's about landlords taking kind of the proactive approach to all this. So if you do all this work that we've been talking about, and and you get in that database and you're getting that information stored about the resident, you're learning a huge amount of them, and you can be a lot more proactive in your work. Back to that, if you want to exceed expectations, it's not just about we're coming and doing this piece of work. If you're a social housing provider, what else can you do? You've actually got an opportunity. You're getting in through the door to do some retrofit works. What else can you do at the same time? So actually, you don't need to come back again so quickly. And so, how can you do your long-term cyclical work at the same time to reduce impact on that resident? They've got to be at home for you to do the solar panels, but at the same time, could you also do new windows or whatever it is that's nearly planned to be done? Because the last thing you want is for that resident to suddenly be impacted a couple of months down the line when you phone them up and go, oh yeah, we want to come and do your windows now. Well, why didn't you do them when I had my last day off for you to come and do some work for me, etc., etc. So lots and lots of things to think about around that, and these databases and making sure we're keeping track of what's going on. If we don't do it, we're just bigger impact on the residents, bigger impact on the people that we're supposed to be supporting. If we do that, reputation goes down. We're going to get through less doors. We're going to have more refusals, more impact. So what's useful to keep on these databases if you're going to go down the line of having a database? It's these kind of things. It's when we last in touch with them, what did you do? As I say, if you're thinking about, well, what else could be done, is having that on that. If you're using the social housing provider database, what work is expected to be done, and can you time your retrofit work to those, etc., etc. So we can do all this. The most important thing with this is for the opportunity for our residents to feed back to us and to share what they're experiencing. So if we know what they're experiencing, then we can actually enhance that and hopefully give them a better experience. So, can they feed back on how the retrofit project's been going on? Feedback on, how did they find the communication processes? Have they been able to communicate with a person? Have they been communicated with a different person each time, etc., etc.? That ability for them to give their narrative and their story of the experience is really valuable learning for you, and hopefully you can learn from it and you can change what you're doing in the future. So is it about doing a post retrofit questionnaire? That's a really useful thing. Definitely think it's worth doing. You might want to think about, okay, are you happy? Things like, are you happy with what you've got? But also, do you know how to use it? Do you feel confident knowing how to use it? Will you still be able to use it in 6 months' time? If you put a heating system in April, it might not be used again until October. So do they feel confident they can do it again? Or should you change the time of the questionnaire to fit in when they're now using that equipment that they've said? So, thinking about, you might also think about, this helps you with your journey of kind of measuring access rates, and have you been able to get into properties to do the work? So these post retrofit questionnaires are really, really useful. Lots of opportunity to get out there, but again, still worth going to meet the resident, going and talking to them as well, because they might say different stuff when you talk to them to when you get them to fill in the questionnaire. I think it's really important that you highlight that there is a complaints policy from the get-go. Residents need to feel confident in that organisation, and the complaints policy for me is one of the things that does that. So if they're not happy, how do they comment on that? How do they kind of communicate that they've gone through a process they're not comfortable with, or they've been put into positions they're not comfortable with, and letting people know that there is a complaints policy. If you're a social housing provider, you might have a really clear process that it's laid out there, and someone manages that. If you're a local authority doing a local grant, it might not be so clear and laid out. So it's a useful piece of work. It gives you confidence. I think also, there's a whole confidence in this, that as you go forward and that there is a complaints process, etc. You should be doing the best thing that you can anyway. But if you know you can get complained about, you might actually just step up and do a little bit more. So some different elements to have in your complaints policy, listen to what they've said, helps inform you what you're going to do, give that opportunity to be responsive. And, if you have been below the standard you would expect of your own organisation, feel free to say that. Feel free to say, no, we have not met our current expectations. We will learn from this. We will do better next time. Without this, about this kind of circle, feedback circle, it's really challenging to learn. It's really hard to learn. It's really hard to maintain trust in organizations. So yeah, really obvious. Avoid complaints in the first place by doing a good job and keeping in contact with people. But actually, complaints, etc., are a great way of learning. So just bringing a case study to try and hopefully kind of tie this all together. Just give you a moment to read this. So, fairly clear on there, isn't it, that they had multiple opportunities, a multi-channel approach to communicate with residents, multi-channel approach for residents to engage with the retrofit program, to engage with the contractors, to engage with the organizations that were delivering it. Understanding, so in kind of informed consent, how can we improve their home, how can we reduce fuel and create energy bill savings, etc. So lots of stuff that we talked about there, all just wrapped up in that one case study. And thinking about your organization, do you have a case study from a previous retrofit program? If you haven't, then why not? They're great ways of learning, great ways of kind of showing success. If you're thinking about the program you're about to start on, or you're involved with now, what's going to be your case study at the end of this? And there's one case study can be a couple of lines long. So we did one around a resident who just very simply said, I get to go to I go to the top up my meter once a week now, where I used to do it twice a week. Very simple case study, very easy to kind of get the message out. She's halved her electricity bills. Another one here through Wolverhampton Homes. A moment to read. So there you go. So very clearly, their systems were installed to prevent damp and mold, encouraging energy efficiency behaviour. So the motivation there was around preventing damp and mold. It wasn't around we're doing this work to achieve EPCC that the warm home schemes are all about. They probably have achieved EPCC, but the focus is around on preventing damp and mold, etc. Think about regular communication opportunity to have those feedback channels and those kind of communication channels. Just two examples of learning from previous streams. So resident liaison partner, which are worth their weight in gold. If you have a good resident liaison partner or officer, worth their weight in gold, amazing. So trusted relationship with the residents. Even better if you can get a resident liaison partner from that community. It might be that there's short-term contracts or something you do something slightly different to get those resident liaison partners from that community. They're able to do the whole thing and answer all the questions, etc. And that's that's brilliant. That single point of contact. And the second one there is about being able to see things in phases and being able to do the work. I jokingly say, if you're doing a solar panel program, you only need to get resident engagement with one resident. You get the panels on their roof, and then every other resident will come to you going, when am I getting my panels? That ability to see what is happening is really powerful. So it's a bit of a checklist, so feel free to copy anything that you want out of these, but just have that bit of a sort of resident engagement checklist. What are the things that you need to be doing, making sure you're ticking. Grand. So that's sort of the end of the main presentation.
Thank you so much, Gareth.